As you said, we're going to leave that conversation there and pick up another one with Republican Brian Fitzpatrick and Democrat Jared Golden, two congressmen who have proposed an alternative to the foreign aid bill that passed the Senate and was declared by the Speaker of the House to be dead on arrival. Do you have any confidence that there's a way to get Republican leadership to move on this?
I do. We have a bipartisan bill. It's the only one in the House. And as of Friday, we have filed with the clerk expedited consideration. Normally, any kind of discharge like that would take 30 days to even be considered ripe. We figured out a way with the parliamentarian to expedite that to a 7-day period.
Just to be clear, this is to go around the Speaker of the House, who has refused to put a bill on the floor.
Well,
it's forcing him to consider.
It's just a way to get a mechanism to get a bill to the floor. And just to be clear about what we're trying to accomplish here, this is time sensitive. It's existential. I just got back from Ukraine. Adviva fell in the past 7 days. We lost Lake and Riley in the past 7 days. And in the past 7 days, 200 families had to bury their kids because of fentanyl. So what our bill does is it combines border security with this foreign aid, both existential. And we are forcing this bill to the floor to make sure that everybody acts because, as President Zelensky said, they have weeks and not months to get reinforcements on the front lines. So
you are trying to create an alternative to the bill that's about $60 billion. Yours is about $49 or so billion. Congressman Golden here, one of the things that's not in this bill, though, is humanitarian aid for Israel and for Ukraine. That's a non-starter for a lot of Democrats. And you have a Remain in Mexico border security policy here that forces migrants to wait outside the U.S. while their asylum claim is processed. How are you going to get fellow Democrats to get on board with this?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember here is that the votes are there to support Ukraine and our other allies, Israel, Taiwan. And I think that the votes are there on border security as well. You know, the Senate started with a bill. They had to boil it down to whatever could get 60 votes. The House needs to go through a very similar process. Brian and I are actually talking about having a more open debate on the House floor. Amendments should be in order. We need to find a way to get a deal that gets us to 218. I think a deal like that has to grow out of the middle and is unlikely to begin with a one-party solution.
So are you saying within that then, if your bill is up for consideration, amendments like adding in things like humanitarian aid are possible?
Potentially, yes, although I think that we also have to set priorities. So at the end of the day, what are the most important crises that we have to deal with in the here and now, in the very short term? And I would say that that would be securing our border and also helping avoid battlefield catastrophes in Ukraine.
Congressman Fitzpatrick, in choosing to go this route, it is defying the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who has said that, you know, he said the initial Senate bill was dead on arrival here. But then he is also seemingly speaking to the Democratic leader in the House. Are you concerned that you might be undercutting the opportunity to get that bigger package ultimately passed, or is it indeed so dead on arrival you need this backup plan?
I don't think we're short-circuiting anything. We are adding a pressure point to make sure this gets done because we cannot afford to wait here. And, you know, if the Senate bill were to make it to the floor, it would have, you know, a lot of Republican votes.
You would vote for it?
I would. If our bill gets to the floor, it will also have a lot of votes. I mean, Jared can reflect the Democrat caucus perspective, but we think, you know, supermajority, I think 2/3 of the House would support this. It is open to amendments. So our bare bones language was just a vehicle to get to the floor. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that we do not waste another day because these are, I mean, Ukraine is in dire straits right now. And that's what I wanted to do. That's why we're doing this. This is actually to complement all the other conversations going on and a potential compromise that might ensue.
Okay. Does the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, support what you're doing?
You know, they currently are pushing for the Senate bill. Obviously, they have a discharge petition. What I would say is that discharge petition doesn't have any Republican support. What we have now is a bill with a discharge petition that is led by a Republican.
This is just the procedural way to bypass leadership to get a vote.
Correct. That's right.
But you're not concerned, to borrow your phrase, that you're short-circuiting the bigger package?
My concern is what is it going to take to get a bill to the floor that can enable the House of Representatives to take action on two key priorities. One, how do we get our own border under control? Two, how do we support our allies in their existential fights in Ukraine and in Israel?
So we're also up against the deadline of this potential partial government shutdown March 1st. What is the timeline for what you're trying to do? And isn't the priority number one keeping the lights on?
Absolutely, and maybe we hitch a ride on the CR with this, right? I mean, hopefully we can.
Something this big, you think?
But yeah, this is not very big. This is, I mean, this is
$50 billion.
This is a pared down. Well, it's military aid, which, by the way, 80% of which gets spent inside the United States. That's a big misnomer that's being perpetuated. You either believe that what we're doing for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is an act of charity, or you believe it's an act of global security. We believe it's an act of global security. That's an investment. 80% of that money gets spent inside the United States, modernizing our own military in a way that we weren't prepared to do before.
Congressman Patrick McHenry was with my colleague here on CBS just the other day, and he said, you can either die as Speaker and worry about them taking you out, or live every day as your last. He's trying to prod the Speaker of the House to be more decisive. Is your action a sign that you also think Speaker Johnson needs to be more decisive?
I think Mike's in a tough political spot right now and needs all the help he can get from all of his allies in the House. So this is a mechanism.
Because he could be ousted.
That's always a risk. I mean, anytime you have a one-person motion to vacate, which, by the way, is never going to happen ever again, we're not going to buy that line ever again, because you see how it's manifested on the floor this cycle. It's basically created gridlock. We will never, ever agree to that ever again. But we got to get through this cycle. We have time-sensitive existential challenges right now. Ukraine is weeks away from giving up significant ground, and we cannot allow Russia to win. So what we are doing is adding an additional pressure point to get a bill to the floor that has bipartisan support in the House. My conversations with my Senate colleagues, any bill that comes out of the House with bipartisan support, in all likelihood, will emerge out of the Senate.
Even though this would not be what the Senate has already approved.
We're going to open it up to amendments.
Okay.
Our vehicle is bare bones. It's going to be open up to amendments and let the House work its will.
I think it's important to point out that the Senate would likely take up something that passes the House with a bipartisan vote.